Was the individual alive when it was inflicted?
Yes.
How can you tell that?
From the hemorrhage.
Is there any sort of other things that would help and assist you in demonstrating the difference between hemorrhage and not?
Well, if we look at the other injuries.
Okay. So let's move on then to gunshot wound C.
So this is gunshot wound C, which was on the back of the right shoulder. Okay, the abrasion collar around that wound is not hemorrhagic. What that tells me is that there is no circulation to that part of the body when that gunshot wound is inflicted. If you think about, an abrasion is a blunt force injury, okay, from an object. It's a friction injury. If you think about riding your bike as a child, falling off your bike, skidding your knee, right? That will quickly turn red and bleed because you've taken off that that top layer of skin. Same scenario here, except I don't have any circulating, I don't have a heartbeat, I don't have any blood circulating to this part of the body, therefore that abrasion stays yellowy white.
So Dr. McDougall, can you give any opinion as to how long time frame elapsed between gunshot wound A to E in the head and gunshot wound C?
I cannot.
Why not?
Oh, because I don't know how long it would have taken him to pass away.
Is there any medical studies that can be recreated in?
We can't do that.
You said he is deceased at that point.
Correct.
Can you give the ladies and gentlemen of the jury an example of what you would see if they were inflicted within seconds of each other?
Well, I can tell you of the hundreds of gunshot wound cases, not even, I just had a stab wound case, but in the hundreds of cases that I've done, the thousands of cases that I've done, there are only 3 where I can tell you the order in which the shots occurred, because some were before the person passed away and some were after. I've had hundreds of gunshot wound cases where they're shot 15, 20, 25 times, and every single gunshot has hemorrhage. So, are they within seconds? No. But I can't tell you, is it, 5 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? There's no way for me to tell you what the time frame between gunshot wound A to E is from when B and C were inflicted.
Moving on to D. What about this particular mark tells you that this is an exit wound?
So D is an exit wound. It's lacerated, okay, because you have a blunt force object, the projectile, traveling at a very high, traveling at a rate of speed and with enough energy to perforate the skin, and it causes a laceration.
And so this is photo number 16 for the record. Can you explain, and I'm going to go forward onto photo number 17 so you can explain what a laceration is and what it looks like.
Yeah, so this skin is lacerated. There's no abrasion margin around it, and it's consistent with an exit wound.
And in terms of where on the body is D located?
So it's right almost underneath the armpit.
And
on the left-hand side of the back.
Going back to picture 16, which direction is the body facing when this photo is taken?
It's face down.
Okay. Going on to photograph number 20 for the record. What are we looking at here?
So this is the left lung. There's a trajectory rod through it showing the pathway of the projectile. What is interesting in this photograph is that there's absolutely no hemorrhage around any of those wounds. Okay, your lungs are very vascular, right? Because your lungs are responsible for taking the oxygen out of the air you breathe and pushing it into your blood, right? In the really small sacs in your lung. So an injury to your lung is going to bleed a lot, okay, if your heart is beating. Okay, there's no hemorrhage in the upper or the lower lobe of the left lung.
And so when you say hemorrhage, what would it look like on the photo? What would you be looking for?
So there would be, so blood would leak out into the area around that lung, and it would not look pink with brown, black staining. It would look red because it's full of blood.
And so Dr. McDougall, if you could remind the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what entrance and exit wound does this correspond with?
So this is entrance wound B. That goes to exit wound D.
Moving on to what has been admitted as photograph number 18. Can you describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what we're looking at here?
I can. So this is the exit wound E. That went with entrance wound A. The back of the neck comes out the right side of the temporal scalp. This is with the scalp reflected forward. So we do an incision across the head behind the ears. We reflect the scalp forward and back. And what this is showing you is this is hemorrhage. Okay, this is blood. This is bleeding. There is a heartbeat.
And so with regards to now E, at this point the scalp is back on this photo, which we've already talked about here. Can you explain why this is a laceration?
So we shave it to show, because it's consistent with a laceration. There's no abraded margin. It's consistent with an exit wound.
In terms of what has been previously admitted as State 74, is this the projectile fragments, a photo of them that have been introduced into evidence?
That's correct.
Why do you recover these?
Because, we usually recover projectiles and fragments so that, turn them over so that crime scene can do whatever gun testing they want to do with the projectiles. These pieces are probably too small, but it's still evidence. So we collect all the evidence outside of and on the body to give to law enforcement in case they need it.
Was there any evidence of medical intervention for Mr. Williams?
No.
And what would that mean?
So sometimes people are transported to the hospital. They still have a heartbeat. And so the trauma team or the emergency room doctors are going to want to do whatever they can do to save that person's life. So sometimes with gunshot wounds, especially, you can have, they can put chest tubes in, they can do a thoracotomy, which is where they open up the side of your, they open up your rib cage to try to get your heart beating again. There's lots of things that they will do to try to save somebody's life.
Were there any, and you said there was none of those in this case?
There were none.
Okay. In terms of the rest of the internal examination, were there any other findings that led to the death of Mr. Williams other than the gunshot wound you talked about?
No.
At ADE?
There are none.
Do you collect samples for the purpose of processing for toxicology?
We do.
And do you do that testing?
We have a toxicology lab. I don't do it personally. We have a toxicologist that does it.
And did you do that for Mr. Williams?
We did.
And in terms of the results of that toxicology, what showed up?
So he has marijuana, THC, and marijuana metabolite.
And can you give any sort of time frame on the ingestion of those
I
substances? Based on your autopsy, did you come to an opinion as to the cause and manner of death for Anthony Williams?
I did.
And what was that?
The cause of death is multiple gunshot wounds, and the manner of death is homicide.
In this case, you could, on both the individual you did the autopsy of and the individual that your fellow medical examiner did, correct?
I can tell you the first shot. I don't know the order of the second and third.
Okay. And the first shot on both of them were the fatal shots.
Because they are already deceased when the other ones are inflicted.
Okay.